Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. My guest today is Taren Pang. He is a full stack developer, and we have been a mutual on Twitter for a couple of years, and he's been saying some really insightful stuff. So I thought I would bring him on the show. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Stewart. I just want to say before we begin that you conceive of your Twitter X account as a kind of journal that you freely write your thoughts on. And I consider that a very courageous, brave act, maybe a high wire act sometimes. But I appreciate the opportunity to write in the margins of your journal, because sometimes you bring up thoughts that, wow, this is really interesting, because it brings up thoughts of my own that I want to kind of explore. So I appreciate the opportunity very much.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. It's really funny because I sometimes say that Twitter is the journal or the note-taking device that talks back. Because normally your note-taking device does not talk back, and Twitter definitely talks back all the time. Sometimes it doesn't happen to me much these days, and I'm not quite sure why, but sometimes, a lot of times, it talks back in very aggressive and insulting and other types of ways, which I feel like I'm mostly immune to. Maybe that's why it doesn't happen anymore, is because there's nothing left in me to react to idiots. But it's really a great pleasure to have somebody come and actually talk back in a way that I'm sure we're both going to learn a lot. So I appreciate that. How do you use Twitter?
Mostly to aggregate information on topics that I'm interested in. I started with basically an interest in cryptocurrency, and then that moved to an interest in Web3 in general. And then more recently, Twitter tech, which is more encompassing. And I find it interesting too, how the Twitter algorithm presents my feed. It seems that they're primarily interested in my setting my eyeballs on stuff that I will read for a while so they can present their ads and generate revenue.
And now, is this a recent transition that you've noticed, this change in the algorithm?
Well, what I've noticed is that my feed, because there are two ways of reading X, right? It's the For You tab or the You're Following These People tab. And usually I have it in the For You because I like the idea of discoverability, and seeing new stuff, not just from the usual suspects. But as a result, my feed has kind of presented more just very general tech stuff recently.
Yes, yeah.
And less of Web3 and less of crypto in general. And it may be because the algo is picking up my reading habits. And I've seen so much of the crypto stuff that I know which ones are clickbait and which ones are kind of maybe I can skip. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know. But I think I should balance my consuming habits, so to speak, between the For You and following, so I get more of the people I'm familiar with,
Yeah, got it. So it's really interesting. As you were talking about the algorithms, it makes me think that, instead of in books we trust, which seems to be like the last 2,000 years of human development, is we trust the books. And now it's like we don't trust the books as much, but we trust the algorithms a lot more. And like the algorithms are the thing that define so much of our lives. And I was thinking, as we talked about it, I'm not sure whether Twitter is actually open source. I think it is now, that you can just go in and see the weights of the algorithm and understand it if anybody wants to. I'm not sure. If you know, please let me know. But I'm pretty sure that Facebook is not open. And so, like that's an important algorithm. And I just wonder, like, free speech, wouldn't it be better if we had totally transparent algorithms so that we knew how we're being manipulated, essentially? Like, I feel like that would be really important information. What are your thoughts on that?
I think so, but I think it also puts a vast amount of responsibility on the end user, and
Yes.
much of which they may not feel like they're technically equipped to handle. So I think maybe it points at an intermediate level where there may be some enterprising companies that can present that level of
Mm,
detail in a more kind of streamlined way that users can understand and make sense of. So I don't see that happening yet. There may not be enough of the demand, but I think because of the information rich world that we live in, and even to make some basic decisions now, you need to ingest a lot of
yes.
information. And how do you trust the truth or veracity of that information, right?
Yeah.
So it's a big problem because, especially now with AI, there was just a post the other day that I think Microsoft released a program that can generate a short video based on one single photograph.
Wow.
So we're in the era of deep fakes potentially, and some intermediary suite of programs that can tease out the deep fakes from legit recordings, video recordings, would be very helpful. I'm not saying that deep fakes are all bad, because
Mm,
some people just don't want to do, a video where they show their face. They may
yep.
use an avatar or
Yep.
something, and that's cool, right? But if something is presented as fact on the world stage, and it turns out that they're using deep fakes, that's fraud. That's outright fraud. So we want to know about that, and we want the tools that can help us make sense of this world.
Mhm. I like what you said about information-rich reality. We're in a very information-rich universe, like in ways that our forefathers were completely not at all um, used to at all. Because if you go back to the hunter-gatherer, there's a lot of information out there in the universe. There's a lot of information out there in nature. If you're just walking around nature, there's a lot of information in mythology. There's a lot of information of all that different stuff, but it's not nearly the same degree of the information that we're bombarded with every day. And not only that, the danger of information is going up, whereas the danger from violence is going down, at least over
Mhm.
the past 100 years. But the actual danger of information and wrong information and propaganda are going up. Like all those things are going to be more and more of a problem. What's your take on that?
I think that there's a lot to that. I read somewhere that 90% of the information that is available now was generated within the last 2 years, something
Whoa.
like that, because of the acceleration of the amount of information that humanity is generating and recording, right? And is on the internet. So if it's not on the internet, it's not real. No, I'm just kidding. But it's just a sheer amount of information that we need to ingest just to make sense of the world. And so it's become an art form. And um, it's like, who do you look at? Do you
Mhm.
look at mainstream media? Yes, a little bit. Do you look at alternative news sources? More and more, that's what I go to.
Mm.
And even uh, I probably put more than warranted amount of trust in information filtering through social media, with the idea that the important stuff will come up sooner or later, right? But that's not always true.
Yeah.
And so it's like if we have more tools that can help us prioritize information, I think that would be good. But again, I don't see those tools around. At least, I don't see them available in a form that I want to interact with.
Mm.
So maybe we have to roll our own tools.
Well, that seems to be where AI is going to come in, because I think AI is a great, great first pass at information. And it's currently been propagandized, like because it was trained on the internet, which was propagandized, and then so it's definitely not something that you should be trusting at all times. And it gets hallucinates, so there's another reason you shouldn't. But then again, humans are guilty of both of those things as well. So it's not like humans are automatically more trustworthy than AI. In some ways, AI is more trustworthy. I would trust AI currently more with my medical situation than I would probably trust about 80% of doctors in the United States. There's probably 20% of doctors who are really good, who have managed to figure out how to survive in this giant administration complexity. But about 80% of them I wouldn't trust getting even close to my body. But I would probably trust a lot of what AI says about health and wellness and such. And so that's just one example. And then if we were to program it, ooh, here's a good question for me because you're a full stack web developer. Have you started programming using AI, and what are you most excited about and what you're building?
That's a fair question. I guess it's a good opportunity to go into my background. I started my career as an architectural designer,
Oh,
so
interesting.
construction architecture background. And my job went away in 2021,
Uh,
uh, and I just didn't feel the passion for architecture anymore. So I decided to completely change tracks, and I took a boot camp, 9 month long boot camp in web development.
mm,
And they they call graduates full stack developers, but it's just one path out of many into programming. And I guess the schools like to teach web development because it's an easy stack to learn that you can see results right away,
yeah.
right? And you can learn HTML and CSS in a month, and then that's what we did. And then we took a deep dive into JavaScript,
Uh-huh.
um, working with the DOM, the
Uh-huh.
uh, document object model, in various ways, including front end libraries such as React. So that's my foundation in programming. And after that, I did about a year of kind of self-paced study in blockchain
Mm.
from the same school. It's
In
Kingsland
Solidity?
University. In Solidity,
Yep.
yes. That was the main program that they taught. We did a bunch of little labs using things like Zcash to look at different aspects of blockchain. But the bulk of the work is in Solidity, and the final project was um, one was to create our own proof of work blockchain from scratch, and the other one was to build a DApp,
Mm.
decentralized application,
Mm.
using Solidity on the back end
Mm.
as the end. Um, and then after that, I did a 4 month training with the MIT extension.
Mm.
They call it MIT Professional Learning on no code, AI, and machine learning.
Oh, cool.
Uh, and so no code is basically, they have programs that are already ready to ingest information. You just have to tune the parameters. You don't have to do any coding per se, but you can have this program. The one we use is called Rapid Miner.
Okay.
Take in the information from whatever source. Very commonly, it's a common separated value file, CSV file. And and then it can visualize the data for you. It can help you clean up the data.
Wow.
Um, and then you can put the data through some training using models, machine learning models, that algorithms that they've already set up. We just have to tune the parameters. And then they present the results to show, whether your model is able to predict results based on
Mm.
the training data.
Mm.
and how accurate it is and things like that. So that's the extent that I have experience in AI. I haven't taken my keyboard to task yet to script AI from scratch, and
Mm.
that's actually, when I came out of the training, it's a total of about 2-3 years of study. I landed in an employment environment that was in retreat. Like,
Yeah.
the money that was available during COVID,
Yeah.
the stimulus money had run out, and big companies were, laying off, big percentages of their workforce. And then there was another program that uh, reimbursed startups for the first year that they hired like new entrants into the field, and that expired. So a bunch of things collided to make it a very difficult job market. So
Yeah.
I'm actually in that situation now. So I am actually in the process of reinventing myself to make
Mm.
myself relevant in this job market,
Mm-hmm.
because they say that, if there are no jobs for entry level applicants, then you have to step up to the game and become better than entry level, right? So,
Yeah, interesting. And this gets into the AI in general. What everybody's saying with AI is that it's going to make it really hard for entry level careers, not only in software development, but for anything, because now AI essentially serves the role. It's not good enough yet to become a senior programmer or whatever the other equivalent is for the sales or whatever. Um, and so it's going to face a lot of pressure for that in some ways. And then the other ways, there's also sort of like an abundance mindset that can essentially find jobs out of nowhere and such. And so that exists. But then at the same time, the market is changing, and I believe that the market is starting to rebound, get a little bit better. And so I want to dig further into that. So you haven't tried to actually use the OpenAI API to program any solutions in that sense of you, because that's what I'm getting most into right now. I still haven't done it yet, but I'm getting close. It feels like I'm getting really close to actually being able to use the OpenAI API to actually code a web app or something like that. One of our AI whisperers, he actually went and did it, and it was very inspiring because he just built this thing on Streamlit, which apparently
mhm.
I thought Streamlit was a way to a Python package that would make it easier to develop like the whole app, but apparently it's really good for front end. So if people don't have a good experience in front end, then they can use that. What are your thoughts on that?
uh, I think that's the way to go. If you don't mind my asking, what kind of use cases are you pursuing with your first foray
Sure.
into AI?
Yep. So that's going to be, and it's this idea I've had for a long time, although now it's much clearer now exactly what I want. I've wanted to automate the process of publishing these podcast episodes. And I actually just recorded a Loom video of the entire SOP today. And then I'll take that SOP and either automate it or find somebody to do it. Originally, I was thinking I would find somebody to do it. But actually, I use ChatGPT. There's a couple different steps. There's publishing the podcast on Libsyn. There's putting the video and audio into Descript so I can get the transcript, and then taking that transcript to a GPT-4 and creating a custom GPT based on the transcript. And then from that custom GPT, I then get the show notes. And then the show notes go into the Libsyn, which is the RSS feed host. And then I also then do all the show notes, the title. I get AI to do a lot of that stuff. And so basically, I'm going to try to automate that entire thing. What do you think?
I like it. I think, leveraging what GPT does well and including it as part of your video is an excellent idea, because like, how many videos do you see on YouTube or, the other platforms that have transcripts and ability to click to a certain point where the video itself is indexable, where you can get to the key information and look it up like you look at an index in a book, right? that will add a whole new level of utility to videos, because videos for the most part tend to be kind of like people view them once. If
Uh,
they're really, really interested in the topic, they'll view it several times and really dive deep into it. But that's pretty rare. But if the information is already presented in a way that you can, just focus in on the parts that are relevant to what you're doing, that would be excellent.
mm, yeah, and that's the whole thing I think with this AI, and going back to that earlier conversation of essentially how do we get the AI to do this first wave pass on all the information, and then only let us know about the information that we really need to find. And it gets to something you mentioned, people watching videos over and over again. I've done that with John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, and he talks a lot about something called relevance realization. And one interesting thing I've learned about AI is that it does relevance realization. It can find out what's relevant inside of a paragraph or inside of a script, and now even inside of a movie. And all of that's going to be really helpful, although it's going to miss some stuff as well. The human in the loop is going to be really important. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I think there are nuances that AI will not catch. Even localizations,
Mm,
like the way a Southerner would speak, it's hard to catch those things because AI is so trained on such general data, right? So, but that gets you into the ballpark. And that's the main thing, because if it alleviates like 80% of the work, I'd be glad to do that extra 20% to get to what I need, right?
yeah, yeah, yes.
So yeah, I like that idea a lot. But in general, the idea of AI replacing human jobs, I think we're far away from that.
Mm,
Even for entry level
mm,
programmers, I think there'll always be a need for people who have that kind of big picture understanding of what uh, a code base is doing. And I don't think AI is there yet.
mm.
I
Nope.
know that there are AI engines that can ingest a huge amount of data, including most of your code base, but to really have an understanding of how all the parts fit together and how to optimize, your data flow and this speed of transactions, you really need someone in there in the loop
Yep.
to make that happen. Um, and I'm actually quite encouraged by AI. I know that when I was doing my training, AI just popped on the scene like 20 early 2023 was when I first realized it was available. Was it 2022 actually?
Uh-huh.
Uh, no, I take that back. It's like late 2022 is when it came on scene,
Uh-huh.
and I thought, wow, what can I do with this? But it wasn't until seeing people work with Chat GPT
Or
on
right.
videos
Yeah, yeah.
that I
Oh.
realized, hey, it's simpler than I thought. You
Mm,
just type in what you want to do. It's kind of declarative in that sense. It's declarative programming using natural language.
uh-huh.
Uh, so I started playing around with it, and at the time I was doing my blockchain program, and it was really useful to convert, um, you know, programming chunks of programs from one format to another.
Mm,
So in React, there's something called uh, class and function blocks, right? So the old React code base was usually based on a life cycle understanding of what happens when you initiate a command, and it's class based. So I have various examples of class-based program blocks that I needed to quickly convert to classless function program blocks. And ChatGPT was able to do that in seconds. Uh,
mm,
and it would have taken me probably, an hour at least to do the equivalent amount of work. So very useful in that sense. Uh, I haven't done much with ChatGPT beyond that. I do have uh, on I think the last month of my subscription to Copilot, which is built into VS Code now. You can use it as an extension, and I have a subscription that expires next month. But Copilot is owned by Microsoft, which also owns VS Code, the most popular IDE in the world, and they also own GitHub, and they train Copilot on all the code that people uploaded to GitHub.
Interesting.
Which brings us to another point is like one of the big issues in generative AI now is like, how do you give credit to the people who created the training data? And I think in Microsoft's case, they probably took care of that with some fine print that nobody ever reads.
Yeah, right? Interesting. That's a really interesting point about GitHub. They have so much code on GitHub. And I wonder if they used it on the private repositories as well. I imagine they only used it on the public repositories, but they might have used it on the private repositories.
Yeah, they could get into big trouble if they use it on private repos. Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
But then,
yeah,
it kind of makes sense because sometimes you see the suggestions and you're working along a Udemy training, for example, right? And the suggestions would almost word for word or token for token match what you're working on Udemy. How did that happen?
Interesting. That's such an interesting point. Have you tried cursor.sh? It sounds like cursor.sh might be cool for you to play around.
Okay.
It's something that VS Code will probably I didn't even know that VS Code was owned by Microsoft, but given that, they're probably working on it, which is probably going to work on a copy of Cursor. Cursor has AI built into it in two specific functions, which is that it's a clone of VS Code. So it's exactly like VS Code, except with these AI features, one of which is to generate code within the page you're working on. And the other feature is to query your whole entire code base, and you can upload documentation and you can upload, and it can go through your entire query base. I'm not sure how good it is when it comes to the thing you were mentioning about how to get the entire code base inside of its context window. I'm not sure how good it is and understand the complexity of how things put together. I don't think anyone is good at that, although Devin claims to be, and there's a few other that claim to be, but I think a lot of those things are hype. But what do you think? Well, I would just suggest you trying out Cursor because I think you would like it. I think you would really like what they've done there.
Okay, I'll look it up for sure.
I'd like to go into you had mentioned on Twitter, there's 3 books: Read, Write, Own, The Worlds I See, and Age of Invisible Machines. The first 2 don't interest me as much. Maybe they would, based on if with more description. But Age of Invisible Machines, just by that title, sounds like it's got an interesting thesis. Can you talk more about Age of Invisible Machines? He's holding the book up right now for those of our listeners, by Rob Wilson.
Okay, so Rob Wilson owns a company that has created the software. He believes that every major organization, even small organizations, should be AI aware. And he believes that the future of our interaction with AI will be using voice and speech recognition rather than typing into forms as the user interface. And the subtitle of the book is a practical guide to create a hyper-automated ecosystem of intelligent digital workers. So that's a mouthful. So the idea is that if you have a business process, you can reproduce it in code and make it highly available to your end users. But it's an art form to put all the information that's in your organization, all the processes, all the interactions, and have this software mimic what the company does on a
Whoa.
day-to-day operational basis. So imagine calling your favorite telecom provider company and listening to their menu, right? Their automated menu. If that automated menu could
Talk
increase
back.
in intelligence by 100 times,
Yeah,
that's
I
what
got it.
he's talking about.
Great. Very interesting. Okay. Yeah.
So the art form involved is that it's not just about ingesting a whole bunch of data into the system. It's about people in the loop at every stage.
Mhm.
And you know, from the person on the front line, public facing person, to people in the accounting department, you know, the uh, corporate decision
Mhm.
making level. Um, they each have a role to play in um, training, if you will, the system and making sure that it uh, gives the correct output given the the user's prompts. And it sounds very Star Trek, you know, it's like Captain Kirk walking on the USS Enterprise and talking to the computer.
Yeah.
That's the kind of world that he imagines.
Interesting. Okay. I'm definitely going to read that book. Actually, I'm going to go get a sample right now. Um, the I got the sense that I didn't create this analogy, but a lot of people think about AI as electrification, not only for our economy, but also for our companies. What you just described sounds like electrification of a company, electrifying knowledge work within a company. And the idea that there are humans as nodes being connected by this AI system that is also voice based. It's almost like a reinterpretation of the computer itself, which leads me to another question I had in the beginning, which is about Web3 and what I like called Urbit, which is kind of in that Web3 bucket, which is distributed computing, peer-to-peer decentralized computing that essentially has no third-party IP internet provider, and it's built on top of the internet. And it makes me think that thing that you just described could be built on Urbit itself, because it provides the networking layer. What do you think about all that? And I know I threw a lot at you, but what's the immediate thought there?
Well, I'm a little bit rusty on all the details of the Rob Wilson Age of Invisible Machines book because I actually read it last September.
Mm-hmm.
And I just took it out and dusted it off because I thought at least I could mention it because it seems relevant to the topic at hand. But the author does go into the contributions of AI and blockchain as part of his system.
Right.
Because blockchain has very interesting properties. It's like it is like a chronology of every interaction it ever has
Yep.
with the end users and with other computers.
Yeah.
And it's transparent. You can go back and look at what happened at such and such a date. So it's like a perfect ledger system is what it is. So actually the other one of the other books I mentioned, I'm gonna do another screenshot here.
Yeah. Read, Write, Own: Building the Next Era of the Internet by Chris Dixon.
Yes, Chris Dixon is himself an entrepreneur, and he invested and started up companies way early, like at the dawn of the internet era. And his book is very insightful on uh, what is happening, I guess, uh, you know, Web3 has been kind of silent lately, at least on my radar. It's like you don't hear about breakthroughs in Web3, although a couple of years ago, it was like everyone was talking about Web3, and there was a palpable kind of sense of excitement in the air about what's coming next. I think they're building, and they're building the next big thing. And Chris Dixon talks about the web that is coming as being fundamentally different from the web that we have experienced thus far. And he talks about what he calls protocol networks, and what they are the basic foundation of what we know as the internet, which includes email. And email is built on the protocol network of SMTP, which enables email transfer, is a transfer protocol. And all of email is built on that. And the other big network, which all the companies we know and love are built on, is the web. And that is built on HTTP, another protocol. And these were originally conceived as open protocols where anyone could jump in and contribute. And that's what the web was in the early days. And I'm talking about like in the 1990s, you know, where everyone had an equal voice, kind of. And then in the early 2000s, the big companies realized the opportunity and built these monolithic companies that most of us, you know, participate now exclusively because they're the only game in town, right? Like all the big social media networks are built on HTTP, but they've become corporate networks.
Yep.
So their advantages and disadvantages. What they do really well is that they smooth out the user experience. So all you have to do is type in, you know, the username, password, you're in, and all of a sudden you can start posting on social media, you know, and it's very frictionless in that sense. And the downsides are they once they capture an audience, they start squeezing you because, you know, if basically if it's free, you know, as many people have said, you are the product.
Yeah.
And
you're not the
really
customer.
Yeah, your attention, your eyeballs, you know, generate advertising revenue, and these companies make big bucks, and they also charge a lot for content creators to post anything on their networks. So, for instance, a good example is the Apple ecosystem, where, you know, they obviously they have really good hardware, very expensive hardware, and people who buy into that ecosystem, when they want to use an app, the the App Store charges the content creators like 30% of their revenue, and that's called the take, TAKE. And you know, they rationalize this by saying, well, you know, it's a lot of R&D to get this product in all these people's hands, and they have tremendous reach. So they are able to do all these things with impunity because it's competitive market. You can always go somewhere else and, you know, try your luck with another platform. You're free to do that, right? So what Chris Dixon is saying is that the new era that is upon us is the era of Web3, which is built on top of a different kind of network. He calls them blockchain networks. And the advantage of a blockchain network is that uh, it introduces the idea of ownership into the equation. So the first generation of the web was the read generation. Second generation, which we are in now, Web 2, is the read-write generation. We can post to our heart's content, but at the end of the day, most of the content is making the corporate networks really rich. And Web3 promises to democratize the web in a sense, by giving creators and contributors more of an ownership of what they create. And what you mentioned about Urbit sounds like it fits right in there. Where you have peer-to-peer decentralized programming between decentralized computers. And there's more to that, because the blockchain also is now programmable. The Bitcoin obviously is just about a storehouse of value, right? But Ethereum, other platforms, Cardano, ADA, Solana, they are programmable. So they're as expressive as any programming language, and you can build into it certain bylaws, almost like creating your own nation state. You can create organizations that have certain rules for governance, and design a system of supply and demand with tokens that creates a digital economy that rewards people who create, maintain the system, validate transactions, all of that within the blockchain network. And it is an advantage because the software in this case runs the show. It's the boss. It's immutable. Once it's in the chain, it's on the chain, it's out there, and it runs deterministically. If you want to change anything, you still can, but most decentralized autonomous organizations would make it so that you have to have a vote, some sort of consensus about what is going to change on that blockchain before it actually is implemented. So that's a new wrinkle in the web. And I have a sense, although if you do a search for, like, I did a search for what are the best Web3 companies in 2024, and the ones that are returned are very, like, they don't strike me as anything new.
What are they?
Well, I remember Ethereum was on the list, and Ethereum has been out there for years, and I'm still waiting for them to show me something besides, an appetite for making money off gas, for transactions.
Yeah.
Because they switched to proof of stake from proof of work a couple of years ago. But now the problem is that the people who have the power to validate are becoming fewer and fewer, and that's
so there is consolidation in the Ethereum proof of stake.
Very much so. And I mean, it's still ahead of many other models, but there is that danger.
Yeah.
And they're also moving away from level one, to sharding their computation to level two, which is like, okay, the network is too busy. We're going to shunt some of that workload to another level. Let them do the compute and send it back to level one. And when I'm reading the industry insiders, they kind of don't like that approach, because It is less secure in a sense because when it
And you're
moves up,
trusting, yeah, you're
yeah,
trusting someone
moves
else's.
to another level, there's the possibility that, it's going to be messed with, so to speak. And then
Mm,
the other thing is it's less composable because blockchain is supposed to be composable. And the idea is that blocks of code are encapsulated in a way that you can mix and match and put them together in different ways
mm,
to create uh, new expressions of what you want to do. But by having so many levels, it makes it more difficult to compose software on one uh, blockchain. It's still possible, but it's just more complex. Um, so anyway, the other items on the list, S storage, STORJ, is just a place where you can store information on the decentralized network, right?
mhm,
So
mhm.
nothing really revolutionary there.
That's
Uh,
why very bullish on Urbit, and I'm less bullish on a lot of Web 2 things or I'm sorry, Web 3 things, including Ethereum. Uh,
mhm.
but I'm very bullish on Bitcoin as well. And I think the combination of Bitcoin and Urbit are going to be the real value because we have the currency, we have Bitcoin. That's the one that's been around the longest. That's the one with the most trust. That's the one that normies know about. Maybe they don't trust it yet. And then you have Urbit, which is distributed computation. And what you just described to me makes me think that a lot of Web3 is trying to fit computation on the blockchain. And that might not be the best solution because the blockchains are much more specific to building a trustable currency, which we already have in Bitcoin. Um, Now, I still am a investor in Ethereum and even Solana and stuff like that, but I'm not a active heavy in that. And I think Urbit is really going to be where we're going to start to see business value accrue to that network in the same way that we saw business value accrue to Web 2.0 stuff. And for the last 5 minutes or so, what do you think about that? Or yeah, and it sounds like you haven't looked too much into Urbit. But what well actually let's go to this question that came up, which I just posted on Twitter and tagged you as well, which is what does business look like in a Web 3.0 world? Do any of the authors talk to that, or do you have some insight into that? What do you think business looks like in a Web 3.0 world?
um, Chris Dixon does talk about finance as
Mm,
one of the huge opportunities in Web3. And um, the advantages of Web3 in finance are that it's um, mediated by code,
mm,
and it's it's not so uh, shall we say vulnerable to manipulation by the company that administers these
yeah,
transactions.
yeah.
So it's um, you can shop around for um, financial uh, management kind of platforms. And if you like what you see in Urbit, it's written in the code, so there's um, uh, less chance of fraud for one thing. And I think these companies may grow kind of like complementary businesses also, because if they're successful with what they do well, they can provide additional services on top of their core
Mm,
services.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So there's a huge upside opportunity there. And I think the main thing is that I think they would be able to uh, give value to the end users
Mm,
more so than the traditional financial institutions, because they because of the opportunity to scale, they don't have to make so much money on any single transaction, right?
mm,
And they can kind of spread it out and still be self-maintaining and profitable. So definitely look into that, Urbit. It sounds really good. The Well, with the last 2 minutes that we have, I just wanted to say, in the debate about accelerationism versus
Growth.
like throttling the whole AI experience, there's a lot of fear in AI taking our jobs and AI making us less human, like second-class citizens. I think most of that is misplaced because with the introduction of every new technology, there have been voices that say, stop it. We don't need so many cars on the road traveling at high speeds. But we managed to adapt, and I think people are really adaptable, and it's just how we use this technology to actually free ourselves from some of the more mundane things. Like with a car, I can do all my shopping, my errands in 2 hours, and
Yep.
that liberates the rest of my day to do other things that may be more profitable to me. So in the same sense, I think AI can help us do a lot of what we consider mundane and kind of grunt work. And it can be a very life enhancing and positive addition to our experiences as people living in this data rich environment that we talked about. So yeah, anyway, I want to thank you for this opportunity to chat. It's opened up some new doors that I'm definitely going to look into. Cursor and Urbit, I haven't heard of them, and see what I can learn.
Cool. How can people find out more about you and your work?
Well, I'm currently in stealth mode. I'm in the process of reinventing myself. So maybe check in a few months and I might have something that I want to share publicly.
Thank you, Taren.
Yeah, thanks, Stewart. Cheers.